Welcome back to Monroe Musings. Today's amazing guest is Owen Hunt, aka Bootsy Greenwood, the blue collar mystic. Owen simplifies spirituality and self help practices into practical tools for transformation, which is incredible. He's such a delight to speak to and learn from. And honestly, everything he does aligns with his chart so beautifully. Owen is a 5-1 sacral generator with single definition. And he also has the channels of transformation, nurturing, tenacity, ambition, and innovation. So many amazing things going on. I'm so excited for you to hear his story from becoming a raft guide to doing stand-up comedy, from being a TV and film producer for prank TV shows, and then pivoting and becoming a coach. And what that means to him, what his coaching looks like, and just the wealth of knowledge that he is. We do such similar work, but we do it from such unique approaches. It was just such a pleasure to speak to Owen, and I hope you enjoy this episode too. Let's get into it.
Can you give a brief introduction of who you are and what you do, and then we can jump into the backstory of how you got there?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a coach and a comedian. I have a producing background, so I worked in film for a long time, and I was a coordinator doing that. And I've gone pretty much full on into coaching currently. And what I really try and do is take a lot of abstract, more like spiritual, esoteric concepts, and then just simplify them and make them approachable, practical, and usable for folks. So I call myself a blue collar mystic. Meaning is like, I just want to simplify this stuff so any ordinary average person can start to put it into practice.
I love that. I think that's part of why I was so drawn to talk to you is we do a lot of the same things where I bridge the practicality of sports psychology with like the spiritual part of human design. And then you're bridging a couple different, I think, modalities in there but bringing them in a grounded way so that normal people could use it. I felt like that with sports psychology, it was very like, yes, this is great stuff for professional athletes, but your everyday person also needs to know how to breathe and regulate their nervous system and set goals and all these other things that are very practical and real world everyday strategies.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it's super fascinating what you do. Really, really cool to work with and, within sports.
Yeah. And then looking at your chart, we both actually have the same profile. So I know you know a little bit about this, the 5-1.
What?
Yeah. So the 5-1, for anyone who doesn't know, is the 5 is the practical innovator. They give practical solutions to people. And so I'm hearing that in both of what we do. So we just are living that out already. And then the 1 line is the investigator, like the depth of knowledge. I know before we hit record, you were just talking about reading a 900-page book because you went down the rabbit hole. And so I know these are totally things we're both already living out. And then there's a resonance with people who share profile lines. And so I'm like, oh, this is the magic right there already.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know if I've ever met a 5-1. Like most of the people in my group are projectors. So it's interesting. But I've been learning a little bit about human design, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, 5 is practical, 1 nerdy. So here we
Yeah,
go.
exactly. Exactly. Very simplified and perfect. I'm actually a projector too. Um, yeah, we are more rare, but that's interesting that your group feels like it's mostly projectors.
There's a lot of them in there, from what I understand. Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily like they're the majority, but it's
They're
a lot.
vocal about it.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like as far as like a comparison go, because projectors are y'all are very rare, from what I understand.
Yeah, like 20%-ish.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. We like systems that explain how people work and why they do what they do in systems. So maybe they're just a little more vocal about their human design fascination.
Yeah, when we went into it in the group a little bit, like
Mhm.
people just got really interested in it because it's very revealing and I think a very useful tool.
Totally. Okay, so when I asked you about your rebellion moments, you listed off kind of this like list of very seemingly unrelated job history. And I would love for you to give, and you mentioned some of it in your intro. I would love for you to give people, I guess, a little bit more of the story of like from a raft guide to stand up comedy to producing to then becoming a coach. How did that come about? Were there moments of like insight, or I need to change trajectory, or I don't know, how do you feel like that all came together?
Man, that is really a good question because I've done a lot of different things, and there have been some moments where it's been very calculated and it's like, well, I'm going to do this thing. And then other moments where it was just on a whim, where I was just like spontaneously, I can't do this anymore and I've got to find something else to do. So for me, like becoming a raft guide, when I quit or when I graduated college, actually, I quit and then I went back and I graduated. I did graduate, and then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I didn't know. At the time I was like trying to be a musician, trying to be a rock star or whatever. And our band broke up as I was graduating, big mess, tons of drama, all that stuff. And someone came and presented in my class what her internship was. And she was working for Outward Bound in Costa Rica, which Outward Bound, if anyone's not familiar, it's like adventure instruction, but there's also like a lot of group dynamics, and you talk at the end of the day and play different, different games, group games and things like that, which was definitely like part of my major. So for whatever reason, she even had kind of some negative things to say about the organization or that particular one. And it didn't matter to me. I was just like, I know that I'm doing that. Like, that's the next thing that I'm doing. And I went down there and they offered me to become an instructor. And I did that for a while. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, group dynamics, psychology, the rainforest. Got to do a lot of rafting while I was there, and then climbing and all different types of things. But I fell in love with whitewater. And then when I came back to the States, I found the most like gnarliest river, that I could find. And I'm like, I'm doing this next. I'm going to go work on the Gauley River, and it's in West Virginia. It's a lot of fun. It's a beautiful culture. Met a lot of very colorful people doing that. And then I chased whitewater all over the country. I wound up in Montana. That was the last place that I worked full time, like basically living in a van down by the river, like the police. And then at a certain point, I just realized, like, okay, well, now what? Like, I went through a breakup at the time. Like, in a van is tough. Tough place to break up. But yeah, like that was a catalyst for me to really start exploring. Okay, what is it that I really do want to do? Because this is fun, and I've enjoyed this part of my life. I really got to explore nature and parts of myself. But there's definitely a cap here. Maybe the river manager or something, and then my friends will hate me because I'm waking them up and they're hungover and they don't want to be bothered. But I'm like, okay, cool. So I came back to Georgia, which is where I'm from. And then I started to work on a tree farm. And I had off and on worked in production a good bit. I had a friend who was a camera guy. He still is, and we're still good friends. But he would get me on, and I got my first real sort of break in production in 2014, producing a prank show. And then that became, I was really good at it. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of creative problem solving and a lot of figuring out every different ruse was a different story. And we got to like be different people and sort of act and in our own way to just coordinate the pranks. And I had to work with all these different departments within the film crew. And I learned a lot about organization and coordination and mobilizing people. So it was a really fun stretch for me, and I did pretty well at it. So they offered me other jobs, and then I kind of got into that realm a little bit. And then 2020 happened, and that made me realize that there was no film work anyway. And then I was like, okay, cool. So I kind of want to do my own thing. What does that look like? And so I started coaching in 2021 for the first time. And I started doing comedy a little bit after, or a little bit before that. Once I was doing some of the pranks, I just decided that I would try that. That was totally on a whim. And then I really enjoyed it. I liked the pressure of it. It was something that I felt like made me stronger, more resilient, more 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 tough emotionally. And then get like I miss the adrenaline from the rafting and stuff. So I think being on a stage and having to public speak and make people laugh every 10 seconds was definitely a challenge. So that's kind of how, I kind of got into the coaching thing. The coaching thing made sense. I really feel like I'm a natural like helper. I'm a type 2 on the Enneagram too, if you know the Enneagram. And so it's something that I really enjoy is helping people. And I learned a lot about that through film. I learned a lot about it through rafting. I learned a lot about it by being in a band and watching it burn away and break up and all the drama that went along with that. So a lot about social dynamics, psychology, and then along that whole entire span, I was reading books and different things. And I found the reality transurfing book in 2016. And that one to me just took a lot of different ideas, models, and systems and just tied them all together. So when I started YouTube, I started sharing information about that particular book. And that's kind of where people got to know me from and what I would talk about. And I still talk about that majority of what I talk about. But there's a lot of other things that I've discovered as well along the path. So I hope that's a decent synopsis.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm like, there's so many things I want to cover. First, I can't believe how many things we have in common. Just very, very briefly, when I was 18, worked as an extra. So I've been on sets, but obviously I was an extra. So I was not really doing much other than sitting around. You worked on a tree farm. I have my permaculture design certificate. Yeah, I don't do much work in that anymore. I find it more like a hobby, and because I haven't had hands-on experience, I feel like I wanna create my own food forest before I'm really giving more design stuff to other people. You mentioned a few things where I was like, "Yeah, that's in your chart. Yep, that's also in your chart." And I was just, um you it's so funny. I love it so much. You were talking about, I think part when you were going to Costa Rica when the girl was giving the presentation and you lit up. To me, that was a full-on gut visceral response. Like, yes, that's it. My gut says yes. I'm pulled towards that. I already like whole body. I just know and I'm going for it. And for anyone who doesn't know, your inner authority in human design is how you're meant to make the most aligned decisions. And for you, yours is sacral or trust your gut. It's like, what is your gut pulling you towards? What does your gut say? Is it like a hell yes or a hell no kind of thing? And you followed that so hard, and I love that. I think too, you were pretty young at that time. A lot of us haven't really tapped into any of that yet. We're still living in a lot of conditioning, which is also amazing to me that you were already following.
Yeah, I learned a lot more. Those layers started to peel off more when I left the rafting thing. Cause to me, the rafting thing was, in a lot of ways, it was really a pursuit of pleasure and enjoyment. I wasn't necessarily trying to discover or challenge myself by doing that. But toward the end of it, I definitely started to challenge and question myself, my beliefs about the world, those types of things. I think my mom was always she was kind of like a hippie, so she was always a little bit, in encouraging of doing your own thing and going your own way and doing those types of things. So she always had that, and a bit of an artist herself. And so that was definitely an influence on me. And I was already doing music. So I think I was kind of like open to newer ideas and things like that. But it didn't really come online for me until 2012 when I quit rafting and got the band breakup story. That's really when I started to dive super deep into a lot of esoteric stuff, conspiracy stuff, spiritual stuff, self-help. All that started to open up to me. So that was in 2012, and that's when I came back to start working on the tree farm.
That's amazing. A couple other things you mentioned. Channels are like a deeper level that are like later on in human design, but you have a channel that's like a consistent strength that you have. One is in transformation, which is being a genius at sensing the gifts and potential of others. And one of the other ones is in nurturing. So like, nurturing other people. And so it sounds like both of those have come into play a lot with your work.
Yeah, with coaching for sure. Like I do see the good in people. I do see what they're capable of. I love that too. And then I think that they often can tell that I see that. And then it hopefully encourages them to pursue what it is that they are passionate about and want to do. And then, yeah, and I love the support part, the nurturing part, right? Like that's definitely something that I have a bit of a knack for. I might get that from my dad a little bit. Also, prototypical type 2 on the Enneagram for sure. And then, like the school group, it's a digital thing, but I definitely am very involved, and I like being involved in the things that I do. I don't want I don't, it's like, I don't mind to delegate. It's a good thing, but also I'm not trying to like waste my own time by any stretch, but it's like, I want my hands on the wheel. I want to be part of what it is that we're putting together and building. So I do enjoy it. I have gone all in this past year on coaching, and I feel like it's really the thing that I need to be doing. So
Yeah, that was one of my questions for you is like, what's lighting you up was right now? And it sounds like the coaching and the reality transurfing.
definitely so. I love the creative aspect of making videos, and I'm doing more things in the field now, like shooting videos like downtown and with people around, and doing that kind of stuff, which is definitely a stretch. And then pushing myself through that, what Bob Proctor called the terror barrier. It's like a threshold where our comfort zone expands when we push ourselves through that. And it can be very uncomfortable and challenging, but the more optimistic we are as we approach that, I think the more that we actually can grow. And I'm looking to transform myself too, and I have been in the middle of that, especially over the past year or two. I think working with Courtney Johnson has had an impact on that, and then some of my other mentors and friends who have encouraged me as well. And so I'm putting the principles that I would share with other people. I'm doing the best to actually take my own advice and do the things that I know are going to push me forward in my own development too. So it helps to have accountability, and it helps to have a community of people who are looking to accomplish similar things.
Yeah, there's a huge difference between saying like, "Hey, go be out of your comfort zone," and actually doing it and knowing what that feels like. Because it's easy to say, but it is not as easy to implement. And so it's good that you're also doing it alongside, but you're in it for the growth for yourself too. I think during school when we were taking more of like the psychology side of things rather than the sports side, one of the things that they talk about is this, I guess, ethical question of, is it okay for you to get fulfillment out of this when it's about your client? And it's like, well, yeah, as long as you're not taking it at the, disadvantage of the client, you're like, I'm just going to make myself feel good. And that's your whole intent. But of course you can feel good about helping people or being a counselor. Or I didn't go the clinical route, but same with coaching. I feel like ethically, it's like, of course it should fill your cup too. It just is also.
Yeah, I think so too, right? Like what I wound up discovering by going into coaching is that many of the most successful people, they have several coaches often, one of my favorite coaches is Trevor Mawad, and no longer with us, but a mindset coach for the University of Alabama football team, the Georgia football team, Russell Wilson's personal mindset coach. And he talks a lot about in his books helping to program Russell so that when they were in those moments where it's really high pressure, that they would create highlight reels and show those to him and then anchor them to songs. So a lot of neurolinguistic programming, a lot of this cool, crazy, kooky stuff that we're into, that we're so nerdy about. A lot of that comes in super handy. And then, Michael Jordan's coach and Kobe's coach is Timothy Grover. He wrote several books. I'm reading one right now called Winning, and then another that he wrote called Relentless. So, as far as the whole overlap and where this stuff kind of like falls, I think it's just absolutely fascinating, how people who want to succeed or do better or improve or win or whatever, like they will find whatever resources that might potentially help. And I get it. Like it makes sense. And on the surface, somebody, I'll introduce myself or they'll ask me what I do. And first I'm like, God, do you even care? Care what I do? And secondly, like, how do I tell them? Because they're going to be like, oh, you're a life coach. And I'm like, oh God, yes, I am. Okay. That's what I do. You're probably not going to come on board as a client, but that's fine. But the people who really do want an edge, they'll find it wherever they can. Yeah, I think it's great to take a little bit of pride in people's successes. It's good. It means that you're doing a good job as a coach, because if they were failing, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be the best for your resume, I would say.
So true. Yeah, it is interesting. A lot of my aha moments early in sports psychology came from reflecting back on all my time in youth sport. Like I had a coach. I didn't think about this till I was in a sports psychology class in college, but I had a coach that would scream. I was playing water polo. He'd scream from the pool deck, like, this is 90% mental. Get your head in the game. And I knew obviously that he meant focus or whatever, get your head out of your ass. Whatever was going on, that's basically what he meant. But when I was in a sports psych class, I was like, oh, there's literally a mental side you can train. Why were we not training it? And if he thought this was 90% mental, why was nothing intentionally being done? And I had all these like, why? And how much better would I have been if someone had taught me how to breathe and regulate my nervous system? If coaches had breathed and regulated their nervous systems instead of, screaming at 8-year-olds or like whatever the thing is. And I was like, okay, we can intentionally do this. I was like, I'm all in. I love it.
I think that's such a great insight. I don't know how many athletes would have ever come to that conclusion, but I think it's brilliant that you did. And then, you've wrapped that in with your work. Like, it's funny that all of these other athletes like Michael Jordan, he said about Timothy Grover that he didn't pay Timothy Grover to be his coach. He paid Timothy Grover to be no one else's coach. So he's like, mine, right? And so he wants that edge, right? And then, but it's funny, like, why wasn't Phil Jackson, talking about this stuff, or any of the coaches that I ever had coming up in athletics? They'd be like, this is 90% mental, just like you said, but they never talked about that. They would just say that like it was just some trope, just some
Yes,
regurgitated factoid that they just say over and over again. Because it's great, but what does that even mean? Right?
exactly. Even like focus. It's like, okay, but we all know what you kind of mean. You mean stop being distracted. But how do you focus? And what do you focus on? And there's this whole chart. I won't go super deep into it, but it's basically like broad versus narrow and internal versus external. So you have like quadrants. It's like you could focus internally and narrow, or you could focus externally and broad. And I think of that like a batter going up to bat. They can choose to focus on their breath and where they're standing, or they could be distracted by like the left fielder or by what the people in the stands are saying. And it's like they are focused, but maybe on the wrong thing. And so it's like, can you intentionally be like, all right, like now I'm channeling my focus into this specific spot? And they just don't teach that again intentionally. Some people come across it on their own, maybe without the lingo and knowing they're doing it. But why are you not giving them the chance to do it intentionally?
It's a really good question because, when I get into the esoteric spiritual stuff, you basically the realization is, oh my God, all we are really is attention. So I immediately want to see this graph, but it makes so much sense because another one of the books, they talk about your inner screen and your outer screen, right? Like paying attention to the things that are out here, paying attention to the things that are in here. And it's like, it's very esoteric, but what the author, it's the same author as the reality transurfing book, but it's a different book. But he's like, you should come into the center screen. And so what is that like? That's half attention on your internal, half attention on your external. But I don't think that's even it, because it then becomes more like a flow state, like Csikszentmihalyi talks about, which oddly enough, I read that book in college. We had to read it for my major. And so that was always something that I thought was fascinating and super interesting as well, and very applicable. So to me, it's like, for the athlete, as they're going up to the box, maybe they have some sort of a ritual, or many of them do, to get into that flow state where they're not really even actively thinking about anything. They're not paying attention to the stands. They're not paying attention even maybe to their breath, but they're just in a moment where it's not even them anymore. So how to induce that state, that becomes kind of the trick, I think, and which is fun.
Yeah. Especially because the harder you try to be, I'm going to be in a flow state, you're not getting to a flow state.
Yeah, that's pure resistance. It's
Yeah.
never going to happen from
You
me.
can't force the flow state.
It's impossible. No, I've tried it many, many times. I heard a cool analogy the other day of someone who's like, you basically, it's like, if you're going to try to get into a flow state, it's basically like trying to drive a plane, or like fly a plane. And so you're bringing your mind along, and your mind is like, think of it as your best friend that you're bringing along, and they have the instruction manual to how to fly the plane, but you don't know how to fly it, but you need them to be able to fly it. So you just start flying it, and your mind's like, hey, whoa, you don't know how to do this. Yeah. We're like, we're doing it anyway. we're just going to do it anyway. You try to have to accept the resistance, like, oh, this is tough, this is hard, allow that to be the way that it is. And then you just say, we're still going to go through the motions of this to get through that, that resistance to the flow state, where if you're trying, right, we both know will never work. But if you just keep going through the motions, and then it's kind of Bhagavad Gita-esque, where it's like you're process focused and you're doing the things anyway, even though it's not clicking. And then you just say, we're going to do this. And, with or without you, don't need the instructions. Fine. You're not going to give me the instructions. Don't give me the instructions. And then, you get down the runway. They're like, what are you doing? You're a crazy person. You're like, we're doing it. We're going to fly this plane.
Oh my God.
And then, you get up in the air, and then finally they are like, okay, fine. Here's the instructions on how to fly the planes. Eventually it can come online through that process, but you just build that process of whatever it is. The athlete that goes up to the batter's box, maybe they've had a tough night all night. Trevor Mawad talks about this too, because his thing is thinking neutral. Because if you walked into a locker room full of athletes and you're like, come on guys, we're going to visualize and everything's going to be positive, they'll be like, this guy's so full of shit. Like, they'll never believe you. But if you're like, God, and his big thing was like thinking neutral and not saying anything out loud to any of the other team members that was negative, that was going to pull things down. That was the one rule that he had. It was just like, don't say anything negative, out loud in the presence of the other athletes and stuff, to bring that vibe down. But thinking neutral, like, so what? Yeah, so what? I'm not in flow right now. That's fine. Cool. I'm still not there. That doesn't matter. So what? I'm still going to do the thing. Tom Brady coming back from the Falcons. God, I'm from Atlanta. We'll never forget that. But many of the other, great athletes who have had a really difficult game, that doesn't mean like just because you've had 3 quarters of just absolute terrible, nothing's going right, things are just not clicking. It doesn't mean that 4th quarter or that last play or whatever can't completely click. If you stay neutral, is his point, then it doesn't matter. You just basically forget about everything that happened before, and then you just continue with that process. Eventually the mind is like, okay, cool, we'll go into flow.
Totally. Yeah. I think a lot of people do that like positive thinking thing. I guess there's a time and a place for positive thinking, but I always like to say, like, you want it to be effective or supportive thinking. Like, what gets you into the mindset that you need to be in, or what is, helpful in this scenario? Is thinking like, oh, I suck helpful? I kind of joke, but I'm like, I know there's going to be that 1 or 2% out there that are like, no, berating myself is how I perform at my best. I'm like, you know what? If that's true and you want to do it, do it. I don't care. But probably what's more helpful is like, what's the literal process? What's the thing you need to do? Like, baseball's an easy example. Like, I just need to make contact with the ball, or I'm going to hit the ball. I'm going to whatever. At least in younger ages, it's like, get a base hit, get on the base. I just need to hit the ball. I just need to whatever it is. Versus like, I need a grand slam, or the whole game win is on me, or I suck and I can't do this and I've never hit off this pitcher, or I hit off this pitcher every time and it's all good. It depends. Some people can live in that upper area, and so some people, that is where teams that get ahead in the first, like, now I'm gonna switch to football, but like quarter, lose the game because they got way overconfident. So I think part of it is, yes, neutral is a great place to be if you aren't sure what your best place is, but also know yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And that might be a key to why a lot of these athletes have personal coaches, because everyone is different, right? And so to know what their tendencies are and what's most helpful for them in those key moments, it's gonna vary. Like Pippen's mindset versus Jordan's mindset versus Kobe or whoever.
Yeah,
they're gonna need different things to play better.
for sure. I mean, that's how I ended up doing what I do. I was like, sports psychology is super cool, and it's like basic foundational. How do you, again, talk to yourself, your mindset, and all those things? But the same exact thing does not work for everybody. It's not quite so textbook once you're getting down to the person. And so I'm like, I needed more than just that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight for sure. Like, to me, that makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, I mean, there are going to be generalizations that we can make, right? Like, obviously, coming apart at the seams is probably never going to help you, right? So we can all agree on that. But then, yeah, everyone is going to have different things that that are helpful to them.
For sure. All right. I do want to get into reality transurfing. So can you try to give, I would say brief, but however much of an overview you want to give? And yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about the book a lot, and I have. I have talked a lot about it, but I would say the main idea of the book is really it's how to understand this idea, like it's locus of control from within. It's lucid dreaming in real life is kind of what the author hooks you with. It's like, okay, cool. How can we basically create a scenario where our heart and mind are in unison, working together as opposed to fighting each other? Because for most of my life, I felt like those two were compartmentalized. They weren't going to be on the same page. Neither did I even understand that they could be on the same page. So, your emotions and your mind are just generally, for most people, I would say, so disconnected and so at odds with one another to even consider for a moment that these two things could work together. It opens up a whole new realm of possibility. And so the basic idea is that when we have a lucid dream, if anyone's ever had one, you become aware of the fact that you're dreaming in your dream. That what happens is, so we know the idea of infinity. And so we know that we're in this physical world here. And so he differentiates between a physical world and a metaphysical world, or the dream world, or the dream space, or the Akashic records, or the immaterial, or whatever. Like there's a lot of different models on this. But what he's saying is that the heart is basically living in this space of variations of infinity, of the dream world or the Akashic records, or however we want to call that. The mind is very much more connected to the third dimensional material world. And so what happens in a dream when we have a lucid dream is that like when we dream, the heart is like out there just dancing in infinity, right? Like it's having all these crazy experiences, seeing monsters that we've never seen in real life, all this stuff, weird, crazy things. And so when we have a lucid dream, the mind comes online with the heart. And so now this whole thing is in alignment. So you're out there in the middle of infinity, and then you can just make decisions and choices and choose whatever it is that you want to see in that dream right now, and it manifests immediately. You're just like, okay, I want to talk to Barry Bonds or whatever, right? And then all of a sudden you're having a conversation with Barry Bonds. It's wild. And you absolutely can do that. There are people who are really, really good at lucid dreaming. And so that is the model for creating what he calls intention. So a lot of the manifestation stuff is like, oh, you manifest, or a lot of the magical stuff is like, oh, you create this thing and you put it out there and then it manifests and it comes back. Well, what he is talking about is basically choosing from this like infinite menu into the reality that we're in. And so we choose in every moment really with our attention. And then when our heart and mind align, that creates intention. And so if we can learn to focus on what it is that we want, it's usually very easy to know what we don't want. And most people can align their heart and mind to get what they don't want very, very easily. But if we can learn to use that to pull in what we do want from that infinite space of variations, then we can start to make progress toward it by really controlling our attention and how we choose to focus. So that's really what it ultimately boils down to. And so like over time, you can create, it takes time because of the material reality, but over time you can create essentially a lucid dream in real life. That's the more or less the elevator pitch. We went a few floors, but yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. But there's a lot of really cool concepts within it. And you start to see some nuances. Like, I don't know that anyone has like really outlined some of these laws and principles as well as he has. The second runner up might be Thomas Campbell, who wrote My Big Toe, The Theory of Everything. Also, great book and a super wise, amazing human being. But like, other than that, there's really not a lot of models for this sort of navigation of the quantum in a practical way here in reality. But yeah, that's the best I could do off the top of my head right now.
That's amazing. I was like, I mean, my brain was relating it to other things. I heard a little bit of like Joe Dispenza in there with heart and mind coherence. And then with the focus and attention, I'm hearing sports psychology and like, and again, intentionally what you focus on, a little bit of learning your own self-talk, like stop focusing on all the things you don't want all the time and ruminating on the things you don't want. And also, our brain is very much focused on safety and survival, more of, like you said, the 3D. And so I get why we know why we tend to go to the negative, but it's training yourself to not and to spend more time in the positive. And then I follow To Be Magnetic for the man. I think because you're connected with Courtney, you probably know of To Be Magnetic.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of the, like, I think the way that you presented it was, I liked it better actually, but To Be Magnetic is a lot of like worthiness and authenticity and showing up with like who you truly are and feeling worthy of it. And again, I think that has to do with kind of the mindset, but I love the way you laid that out. I think obviously if it's 900 pages, that is a very brief overview of it, but I think it sounds like it has a lot of practical guidance, which is again what we both have come back to. It doesn't help to give people something that's so esoteric. They're like, okay, that's cool information. I can't do anything with it. And lucid dreaming, I have never heard anyone present it in a way that's how you lucid dream in while you're actually awake in the daytime. I have not mastered controlling my lucid dreams so much. I've gotten to where I'm like, oh, I am lucid dreaming. And I almost can get to where I'm like, oh, I want to direct this, but then I'm out of it. So I'm sure there's training that you can do on that. I'm assuming that's part of this.
Well, it's actually not, but it's
Okay, no.
definitely the metaphor, because like what he's trying to say is like you can do this in real life, but you can absolutely train in dreams 100%. And for that, I have a good friend, my friend Abby, and she's a very avid lucid dreamer, and she and I have done some different book clubs and things like that. But I would recommend for anybody looking into that, Carlos Castaneda's work. He has a insane amount of work on lucid dreaming and how to how to how to do that and what to do in the dream space and all this stuff. There's volumes and volumes and volumes. And there's a lot of other people too who've done really good work on lucid dreaming, but he uses it really as a metaphor. He's like, it's not necessary for you to learn lucid dreaming in order to be able to do this model, but it's a really good example of how intention is formed. It's just like what you said. We naturally go to the negative for survival. So it's so easy for us to be like, oh, well, bad, 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 bad. But once we start to take control of our attention and learn to choose what he calls choose, then all of a sudden we can shift our attention and focus, and we can basically hack confirmation bias for ourselves and start to see the things that we want to see more and more and more in our reality. And so I can give like a simple exercise that they talk about in one of the newer books that's like so straightforward. It's just, you just are basically programming your mind to pay attention to certain things, and then you're just logging evidence every time you see something that matches that. And as you do that, you're really starting to see a feedback loop occur, and it just begins to develop and more naturally on its own, and it just snowballs from there. So yeah, it's really about attention and, coordinating what it is that you're paying attention to, focusing on, and then from there, taking the actions that are presented to you. So one of the things that was really helpful for me for the book is the idea of infinity. And it's like, well, dude, if infinity is real, and we know math teacher told us 3rd grade, right? Like it's a thing. My mind cannot understand it. But if that's true, then there is a version of me that I could be, like even in this reality. And so before I found the book, I felt helpless. I felt like I couldn't amount to anything, that I couldn't change. But that idea alone helped me to be like, oh, well, it has to be possible for me to be able to change, because there already exists like whatever version of me that I want. So yeah, maybe I'm not there right now, but like if I'm making progress and into becoming that person, then slowly and surely I can become that. Later in the book, talks a lot about the same as To Be Magnetic, allowing yourself to have is what he calls it, but that sense of deserving. But you get into that more and more, and you start to dial in this idea of who you are, and then begin to make choices based on who that would be. So I guess it gets into quantum entanglement too, but that really helped me a lot to like understand and give myself a a bit of a reprieve and be like, okay, look, dude, like clearly you can change. You're not stuck. You're not like limited here where you are now. You can change and you can consciously become another version of yourself. So pretty trippy, but also, I mean, I didn't make up infinity. You know what I mean? So, it
Yeah.
really helped. Yeah, it really helped me just mentally. And I think that's something for people to consider.
Yeah, I think, hope and purpose are huge for people. If you don't feel like you have any hope of change or movement or direction, especially and you feel like you're in a place without purpose is very like I get why people just kind of stay there because it doesn't feel like any actions are going to get you anywhere or you don't even know what action to take. My like main philosophy that's so like generalized is developing self-awareness and taking intentional action. And for me that's like learning yourself, learning the things that are holding you back, but also learning where you're at and where you want to go, but then also taking that step and taking those action steps in the right direction. Something and I don't know if you can basically what I'm gonna say is this is an exercise I did when I was learning to regulate my nervous system in a job where I felt very physically unsafe all the time and emotionally unsafe most of the time. And I just set an alarm on my phone to pause and take deep breaths every hour on the hour. And so it was like no matter what throughout the day, I got, 7-ish breaks of maybe 3 breaths, less than a minute, maybe about a minute. And it was just an intentional reset to the point where I don't even have to have alarms anymore. I just naturally reset throughout the day. And so I'm thinking something like that for somebody who's just starting out wanting to be more conscious of things. Like, do you have ideas or tips or exercises for people that would help them just start in their day to day?
Yeah, one of the ideas that's in the book, it's a second chapter. It's this idea called pendulums, which is really about energy and how energy moves. I don't, I, it's, there are other like esoteric like books that talk about these concepts. They talk about them as demons or egregores or tulpas or tulkus or whatever. Like Buddhists have names for them. Every tradition kind of does. But the pendulum I really like because it's like non-personified and it's like an energy form or a thought form or some sort of like prodding type of like distracting type of thing that can basically set you off, right? And so any group is going to create its own pendulum, its own energy. And then within that structure, like the more aware that you can become, the author says something that you could do is rent yourself out. So when you're in that environment that is unsafe, that it feels tense, if you can learn to sort of disengage and just become more of an observer, very much like you regulated your nervous system through breath, then you can kind of detach a little bit from that environment and those pendulums or energies that are part of that environment. Most of us latch on unconsciously to these pendulums, and these can be like very broad. So, like political party, sports team, any religion that's dogmatic and traditional, those all fall under pendulum structures. Anything that's a hierarchy, when you first start hearing about this, you start seeing these things everywhere. But it's like, this is kind of like how nature's organized through energy currents, through like energetic systems that are moving all the time. You start to notice them. But because of that, it actually empowers you because now all of a sudden you can kind of manage your relationship to them. They can be a little bit more close to, so where it's like this thing that just provokes you. And so when you learn to notice that and you feel what that feels like, that resistance in your notice system, you can wake up in time to not react to it. So you start to build a little bit of a buffer there where you're like, okay, I just got, you know, provoked by this thing or hooked by the pendulum is the vernacular. But it's like at that point you feel it and you're like, oh, okay, cool. And then you don't react. When you don't react, you keep your energy instead of feeding that energetic system, whatever that is. So like, yeah, it's a bit esoteric, but you start to see these things everywhere because people start to identify with these energies. Like you join a group and it's awesome group or whatever, but then you get a little bit too invested and you don't manage your relationship with it. And then all of a sudden it's taking more energy from you than you're getting back from it. So when we can kind of renegotiate these deals that we're making with these different organizations, groups, habits, etc., like all of those fall under pendulums, then as we do that, we start to keep more and more of our energy and instead of giving it over to these other things. And most of that is unconscious until we realize, oh my God, like I've just been kind of, giving all my attention and energy over here to this job or this group or this, business or whatever it winds up being. And then we can start to be a little bit more aware and keep more of our attention and energy. So it's really about energy management when it comes down to it, as kind of like abstract as that is. That concept alone, like, completely changed the way that I viewed the world.
It sounds like it can be micro or macro too. Like I'm picturing maybe it's a clique gossiping at work. Like, did you get sucked energy wise into that? And then like an hour later, you're like, oh crap, I've been meaning to not gossip anymore. And I got sucked into it and I contributed to it. And now next time I can be like, oh yeah, okay. And like go back to my work. Like I need to be more aware of what I'm getting sucked into. I would think of that as a little more of a micro one. I guess habits would probably be the most micro. And then macro being like your political group or maybe your religious group or a hobby you're in or whatever, like a bigger cultural movement.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's macro and micro, and generally speaking, these are things that we identify with too. So it like kind of steals little pieces of our identity because it's like, oh, I'm a Georgia fan or whatever, and so then all of a sudden, someone that you would get along just fine with on a day to day, you're throwing chicken bones at a tailgate party. You know what I'm saying? So it's like just because they're wearing a different colored shirt or whatever, right? Like as an example, but the same thing is true. If we extrapolate that onto politics or whatever, all these huge groups and ideologies and all those types of things, and then also just within ourselves, like moving around, you bump your knee on something and you just like scream out a bunch of curse words or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, can we learn to like create space and more of a buffer between stimulus and response, just like other books will talk about that as well. Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl is a great example of that, where he talks about free will. And so that was really enlightening to me. And then I started to understand and really even begin to sense more energy as I go about my day. Like I'm more perceptive of it. And that sounds kind of weird, but it has been very useful. Like you just like other people are perceiving it too, and you just like give a look to someone and then they're noticing the same thing you are in an environment of, and you're like, oh my God, like, wow, this is crazy. These subtle sort of nuanced expressions, ideas that are just kind of floating around. And if you're not aware of them, it's really easy to just kind of get sucked in, right? The gossip's a great example, because if you were to get sucked in on that, and then all of a sudden, how do you feel afterward? Like if you feel drained, then that is what the author would say is a pendulum, and it hooked you and you gave your energy to it. And that's not necessarily, I mean, it's not always a bad thing too. Like I said, I started to see him everywhere and I'm like, oh my God, there's a devil behind every bush. But it's like, this is really just how society and even nature is structured. Like an ant colony, a school of fish, a flock of birds, right? Like that's an energetic system. There's really not even a leader there, right? Like we perceive it to be that way. But these hierarchies are kind of like established in nature just naturally. So it's not a bad thing. It's just something to become aware of. And then all of a sudden we can free up a lot of our own energy, and then we can use that for our own advancement, as opposed to working on behalf of some other structure, some other pendulum, some other group, some other authority.
Yeah. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be something bad. It's a matter of like, do you want to be giving your energy to this thing or not? And you having the ability to make that choice consciously. And that comes with that space between, something, a stimulus and I would say reaction, but you would hope for a response more than a reaction. It's
Yeah.
giving you that space. And it's just letting you have a little more conscious choice over where you are giving that attention and that energy to.
Yeah, you got it. You got the whole concept. So that's exactly right. And it really changed the way that I interacted with the world and saw the world. So it was something that I just started. Hey, everybody, you got to read this 900-page book now. I actually made a summary for people who don't want to, read 900 pages. They could read a couple hundred. So that's out there. And then I have uh, a school group as well where I engage with people and just try to make the subject matter more simple, and a YouTube channel where there's like a simplified like breakdowns and stuff like that. I just try to make the ideas themselves more digestible as much as possible because it
Well,
explains.
it sounds like you're doing a great job of it. I mean, I had only heard of it from you a few times and in, brief posts, and I feel like it makes sense and
Yeah,
is applicable.
that's good. Good. Yeah. I mean, that's, it's not everybody is going to go crazy about the model, and that's totally fine. But the folks that do, like, it really seems to land with certain people, and then it absolutely can dramatically impact their life. And some people are just natural, like Courtney, for instance. She's just a natural. Like, she's talked anytime she talks about manifestation, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what Vadim says, because she'll talk about you got to change yourself, right? And so, like, at the end of the book, he's saying you've got to change the world as a mirror, and you've got to change the image that's being reflected in the mirror. You can't push the mirror or change the mirror, right? So it's really about us and how we transform and evolve and change. That is what is really going to shift the reality around us. Everyone wants to just stay the same and get more shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, that just seems to be
Yeah,
that's what marketing is doing to people. It's,
yeah.
oh yeah, just stay, who you are and don't ever change, and you can get the thing that you want. But the truth of it is now I don't even myself really like that it's true, is that in order to have the thing that we want, we really do have to change. And so that's what the book ultimately encourages you to do, but it also encourages you to accept yourself and to understand what self-worth is from an individual perspective, that you're very unique, and that every person here has what he calls like your soul's frail or your essence. And so there's something specific about each and every one of us to appreciate, even before we begin that journey into self-development. Like, I think there are sort of two paths within it. It's like there's self-acceptance and then there's self-development. And if you do self-development before you accept yourself, like, you're just going to be chasing a carrot on a stick. And I don't think you're ever really going to feel happy or fulfilled. And if you just accept yourself and you don't do the self development, then very likely you're not going to get the things that you want in your life. So I would, encourage people to start with the acceptance and then begin to develop from there. So one of the mentors that I've had who will always say, you're always striving, never arriving. And that was such a puzzle to me, because I thought, well, I just need to arrive. But then I'm not going to, but it's a both and. It's like we can strive while we arrive. So that puts us in a position to go in the direction of our goals and dreams and have fun doing it. So it really becomes more about the journey.
That was beautiful. I'm glad you wrapped that up with we're talking about, you have to change. And I think sometimes people, particularly before they start, are more of a, you want me to not be me. I'm like, well, no, I want you to be you, but I want you to show up a little more consciously and I want you to be a little more aware. And those are changes, but it's not telling you to not be you. And so you're like allowing for this individuality and talking about change, but there's kind of the paradox where you do need to change, but you also need to accept yourself, and you have to figure out how to handle that paradox in your mind.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. And it was something for me once I started to figure that riddle out a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. And then in the further books that Vadim writes, he really encourages self development. But in this particular one, the reality transurfing one, it's really about self acceptance, and to be able to let that land, right, is it's amazing. And then your life really can be enjoyable. Like, you as soon as we're like, I'll be happy when, we're pushing this thing out there, and we'll never, even when we attain it, we'll feel empty. So by being able to understand that idea and to get into the acceptance of self, then we can begin to develop into more of who we really are. We start to really understand that and then begin to carve that out for ourselves here and now and express ourselves in a more authentic way.
That's amazing. Is there anything I didn't ask you about that you would like to be asked or that you would like to share about?
Oh, man, that's a interesting one. I think you've done a great job. I've really enjoyed sharing. Hopefully I didn't like go off on too much of a tangent with this stuff because I can get pretty deep into the weeds with some of it. And to like introduce the concepts to people is really my goal, is to be like, yo, check this thing out. It could potentially help you. And if it does, great. If not, that's awesome too. Yeah, I've found a lot of use through this and many other books and models. And yeah, I'm just excited to be able to share a little bit and grateful for your time. And yeah, I look forward to asking you some of the same questions and learning a little bit more about your journey. Yeah, how it's applicable. Clearly, we have a lot of overlap, which is very cool. Enjoyed connecting.
Yeah, me too. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed learning your story. I think you explained that amazingly. There's a lot of overlap, and I love that. It just shows that there's a lot of different avenues people can take for their growth, their self acceptance, their growth, personal development, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of paths there. And this is one that sounds very practical and grounded, and you have it wrapped up pretty nicely. And you also said that you have like a summary so people don't have to read the 900 pages that if they don't want to. uh, I know some of us are readers. You named, gosh, a lot of books during just this conversation, and I obviously can see your stack of books behind you. uh, where would you like people to go to connect with you?
Yeah. The school group is awesome. That's a great place to start. I have a quick jumpstart course there that I just created on reality transurfing. And you can learn the basics in one day. Literally, it's like 3 videos, 20 minutes. 3 videos, 3 exercises. Each video is like 6 minutes. So that's a great place to do it. My YouTube channel is Bootsy Greenwood. I'm Bootsy Greenwood on all the social media platforms. So if you want to connect with me there. And then yeah, and I like to talk about other stuff too. So I'm interested. I see a lot, yeah, like you said, a lot of overlap in many other modalities and books and things like that, which I think is awesome. So I love to share and connect any of those social media platforms that people are on, they like. I'm pretty consistent on YouTube, and then school is there. And then I have a website, it's bootsygreenwood.com.
Perfect. And I will have the links in the show notes too.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal.
Thanks for tuning into Monroe Musings. I hope this conversation gave you permission to trust yourself a little more, to choose your nature rather than culture. If you haven't already, I would so appreciate you to subscribe to the show. And if you would like to explore your own human design chart or learn more about working together, please go to my website. And remember, going against the grain isn't just rebellion, it's coming home.